Jeff Marek joins us now from the home studio. Jeffy, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
Timmy, how are you? Jesse, good evening. How are you guys doing today? I just love the fact that Phil Kessel is going to become the Iron Man. Has he always played on the perimeter? Yeah. Has he been a peripheral player? But here, to me, has been the greatness of having Phil Kessel on any team, and that is goals are hard to score in the NHL. Like, they're really hard. And when you're on a team where you have to grind for every single goal, man, it takes it out of you. One of the biggest luxuries I've always felt you can have on your team is someone that has the ability just to skate down the ice and snap one in.
Right.
It takes all the pressure off. It's like, oh, thanks. Phil just got a couple. Phil just took all the pressure off, all the heat off, and when he finds the right spot, and the sweet spot of the bat was always him playing third line with the Pittsburgh Penguins, could have made a Conn Smythe Trophy candidate argument for Phil at that point. That was probably the best spot for him to be in ever in his career. It's a luxury when you have a guy that can just come in and snap in goals, and you don't, I'll be blunt, you don't have to work for them. Just comes down the wing and that shot is ridiculous, and he scores. It takes all the pressure off. And if I could say one thing, I'm just jumping all over the place here. Can I get one thing in about Keith Yandle and the Philadelphia Flyers?
Yes, please.
So one thing that I don't want to be lost here about Keith Yandle and the Flyers last year. So Yandle sets the Iron Man mark, and there were plenty of times before that where a lot of people said, I'm not sure whether Yandle should still be in the lineup at this point. And then he breaks the record, but they kept playing him. And I asked someone in Philadelphia why they did that. And they said, out of respect to Keith, we wanted to make sure, because we knew that Phil Kessel was going to catch him. You know that eventually he's going to catch him. We wanted to give Keith Yandle enough runway that Phil Kessel couldn't catch him in the season last year, so he could enjoy the rest of the season as the Iron Man and enjoy at least one summer of being the Iron Man in the NHL. I thought that was a real classy touch by the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah, it is a nice touch, and I didn't know that. So I appreciate you bringing that to the table. So, okay, these are all nice stories. Phil Kessel, Iron Man, Keith Yandle, Philadelphia Flyers, a little tip of the cap. I love it. What's your best guess on the Vancouver Canucks at this juncture in time, Jeff Marek?
Ooh, boy, best guess at what? As to what happens? What happens tonight? What's the future? Do they tear it down?
All of the above.
Connor Bedard.
All of the above, my friend.
I'll tell you what. Bless Jim Rutherford. He could have gone. He could have said, yeah, you know what? I'm not doing the interview with Scott on Saturday on After Hours, but he did. He showed up, and Scott did a great job answering, asking all the appropriate questions, and good on Rutherford. He answered them. I think there's a lot of decisions that are being weighed right now in Vancouver. Like, I think it'd be ridiculous for us to assume that they're not having the coaching conversation right now, that they're not thinking about other candidates. Like, we all love Bruce Boudreau. I mean, everyone. I mean, he's been in the NHL for, you've talked to Bruce, I'm sure, countless times. He's one of the most lovable people in the world. But, even Bruce would understand that. I'm sure those conversations are happening. What do we do if we move off from Bruce Boudreau? How many times have you heard structure coach, and the names like Claude Julien and Barry Trotz pop up? I think they're probably having those conversations. I think they're probably having the conversations, as ridiculous as it may sound early in the season. I wonder if they're having the conversations about Connor Bedard as well. Like, when you dig a hole early in the season, it's really hard to dig yourself out of it, even though they're only a few points out of a playoff spot right now. It's tough to dig yourself out. We know how Connor Bedard feels about the Vancouver Canucks, and I'm sure the Vancouver Canucks would love to have someone like Connor Bedard in their lineup next season. Again, it's a lottery, so you place your bets on it.
Right.
I know they don't want to go through a rebuild, and I understand. Like, they don't want to go through like an Arizona, Chicago style rebuild where you strip everything down and the goal is to lose and give yourself the best lottery odds, and eventually you accrue enough talent you can put together an elite level squad. They desperately don't want to do that. But I'll tell you, Tim, like, the point that I've been trying to make over the last little while is I don't think Vancouver does. Like, they don't need to strip it down to the nuts and bolts. When you have a look at what they have already, as long as you do it on the timeline of like Pettersson and Hughes, you have a goaltender who's elite. I know he's having a soft start to the season, but Thatcher Demko is one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. You have Quinn Hughes, and you have up the gut, you have Elias Pettersson, and you have Bo Horvat. Like, is that not like the beginnings of, as long as you do it on their timeline and only bring in players that complement that timeline, does that not look like kind of what the Rangers did, like a rebuild on the fly, announce to the fans you're going to do a rebuild, but you still hang on to Kreider and Lundqvist and like a lot of your key players. You get some lottery luck too, but like it kind of feels like this is the way the Vancouver Canucks can go. There's just got to be some painful decisions along the way, though.
Yeah, I compared it to the Tampa tank for the Toronto Raptors, where they had been good, not good enough, and then they go to Tampa and they have one bad year and they get Scotty Barnes.
You know what the really difficult thing is here too, is it's one thing to be a bad team and have a lot of cap flexibility. Look at Chicago, look at Arizona.
I know.
If you're a bad team and you're capped out, it's hard, man.
The one thing that surprises me here, Marek, is that we asked Canucks fans, are you ready for the rebuild now after Rutherford's comments? And right now, over 1,100 votes, 70% are saying, yes, do it. And I know the handle is Tyler Rebuild the Canucks. He says, I think the second answer should be, no, it's late, because most fans have been waiting 10 years for the rebuild now. With that being said, yes, do it is still the obvious choice. I can't believe how many. I know it's split in Vancouver, but I can't believe how many of them are saying do it with the pieces in that room.
Okay, here's the follow-up poll. Okay, this would be interesting as well. Complementing what you've already done. Would you still buy tickets if they rebuild?
Oh yeah.
Because
send that out, boys.
Don't forget. That's a big one. It's one thing to say, oh yeah, sure, we'll rebuild. Will you still buy tickets? Well, no. So your ownership.
That's a great point.
That's great. You want to rebuild, that's fine. Will you still come to the games? Like there's some markets that will, like Toronto Maple Leafs are the prime example.
Right.
Like they went through it, Marner and Matthews went through the entire saga. We know how they got there. Fans still went. Right. The follow-up is, and this is the question that, is talked about at the president's level and certainly the owner's level as well. It's one thing to say, yeah, you know what, we need to rebuild and tear this thing down. Well, how much is that going to cost us?
Right.
Knowing we just went through COVID and we've already lost a ton of money. It's one thing to say, yeah, we need to rebuild. The follow-up is always, if the team does rebuild, will you still buy a ticket? That's the big one.
Last one for you. You brought up the Leafs, and it just reminds me of how many times the Leafs Stars have been run over the last little while. I was talking about it against the Dallas Stars, and then they dress Wayne Simmons, and it still happens against Winnipeg. Are you worried? I'm not worried about long-term where the Leafs are going to finish, even with their injury so far. I still think they're a good team. This worries me a little bit, Jeff, that they can't sustain their stars taking these kinds of hits for 82. Are you worried?
Here's the thing, though. This is what playoff hockey is. Like, you're watching Mitch Marner and wipe blood off his face. You're looking at guys like, think of what the Tampa Bay Lightning are the best example. Look what Tampa's put themselves through. Oh, look at that hit, right? And then who comes in? Of course, as we all predicted, Morgan Riley. We all thought but Logan Stanley and Wayne Simmons, here we go. No, Josh Morrissey and Morgan Riley throw it down on Saturday. But look at what teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning put their bodies through in the playoffs. Like, you may not like it, but this is the kind of stuff that happens in the playoffs, all the visuals that you're showing here right now. And to me, it's like, if you can't handle it, like, I'm sorry, there's no Stanley Cup for you. Like, by the time you get there, you have to be able to make those sacrifices to play that style of hockey. And if you can't, then you have a problem. Now, can you sustain that? To your point, I think it's a really good one. Can you sustain that when guys are running at you 82 times a year? No, that's a real tough slog. But I look at it and I say, Tampa has the next man up mentality, and that's why they're successful.
Right.
The no passenger mentality, that's why they're successful. To me, it's like, all right, can you hang in that high rent district? Because that's what playoff hockey's like. Yeah,
and I wonder if the Leafs have the same sort of depth that Tampa has had to deal with that kind of next man up mentality. Marek, always love what you bring to the table, and I will text you when we find out whether or not Vancouver Canucks fans who asked for the rebuild will pay for tickets during said rebuild. Thanks, buddy. Always appreciate it.
Be good, Timmy. See you, Jesse.